welcome to the Dark Path podcast. Today, I am happy to be joined by an old friend I made in my musical aspiration, my earlier musical life. This is Johnny Ketlo. So Johnny, if you want to introduce and say hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm Johnny Ketlo. I know Luke from back in the day, 10 or so years ago. Our bands were playing together in metal scene. He was a karate instructor. I attended a few of your classes, actually, Luke?
Yeah, I remember.
You kind of got me up to speed on kata training, which was really cool.
Yeah. No, that was a really fun time because you never knew it at the time, but like that was the days when you could go to shows every weekend and there was lots of bands playing, and even though there was drama within all of that, there was still a lot more fun. So
yeah, what's different from back then to nowadays is like I remember going to Megadeth concerts where you're down in the crowd and it was nothing but wet hair just slapping you in the face.
Oh yeah, you think about mosh pits. Yeah.
Can you imagine that now?
Oh, I have to assume we're going to come back to it at some point because it was.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been a wild couple years, and since I haven't seen you since before all the chaos started the last couple of years, do you want to talk about maybe what's been going on for you in the last little while?
Well, it was working as a comedy hypnotist and doing live music performance. I play guitar and sing in a couple of projects. And, when we were doing pretty well. I think between those two things, it was doing great. It was awesome. But, the pandemic comes along 2020, February, and put a stop to all that. So I instantly lost my jobs. And I had been an entrepreneur for a long time. I hadn't worked a regular job in a really long time. So that was an adjustment. And I was really used to being my own boss and like not having to deal with anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I moved away from the city in 2016, 2017. I just had this weird feeling in my gut where it was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. And I didn't know what was wrong. And I was like going around. And I finally, one day I remember it clicked and I was just like, I got to go back to the woods where I grew up and get away from the city, which was what I did. But I was still doing comedy hypno and I was still doing records. Like I got my studio here out in the woods, right? So I was doing like, I played in the metal group traditionally. And then when I started doing hip hop and pop with my brother, producing that, which paid a lot more money than the metal did. And so we were enjoying that, aspect of music and performing, going really well. And in a native culture vibe, like we're I'm from the Nahtli-Watan Native First Nation band, and so we kind of had this group out here like doing that kind of stuff, and it was going really well. But the pandemic came up, and now we're not. We did play some shows, but they're not like coming down the pipe like they were before because of live venues, getting bodies in a room. And same with the comedy hypnosis. It's just there's no way you can. It involves like touching people's hands, get strangers passed out on each other from the crowd, volunteers and stuff like that. So it's just you can't do it.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a regular jack-off job, which is actually not really regular. I'm doing film and communications for the res here. And it's really fun. I'm working close to home, so I'm really thankful about that. And I'm close enough to the woods where I feel comfortable all the time. So
I think about that myself, being still in the city quite a bit because I grew up on Vancouver Island and it was a lot less city than Vancouver. But yeah, no, it's interesting you bring up the with the hypnotist stuff that you were doing, where you have to make physical contact to a small degree with certain things because it's part of the way that the perception and the experience of the event goes. And of course, for me, with teaching martial arts, I mean, obviously you have to be able to interact with the person to learn martial art. And it's one of these things where it's like, okay, well, did anybody really like assess how valuable those things are compared to anything else? Because like one of the stories I get from a lot of people right now is when the pandemic first hit, including myself, it was like, holy shit, what is this? Like, what's going on? I want to be careful. I want to have that extra layer of caution. But as the information comes out more and more, and it's like, well, wait a minute, do we really need to push all of this stuff all the time? Or can we like start to edge towards a little bit more of a normal behaviors? And that question to me always comes back to like, you know, do we need to make kids wear masks all day at school? I don't really think that's really helpful for the kid. And I think they're losing something when that happens. So maybe, you know, maybe initially having no rock shows, no hypnotist shows made some sense out of an abundance of caution. But at some point, aren't those things important? Don't they have a place?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they should make kids wear masks all day at school. I don't know, man. Like, I'm not down with the whole thing because it's, well, for one thing, like when, I don't know if you noticed, but like in 2016, when Trump became the president, everybody was like really divided. Mm-hmm. And it was like getting ridiculous. And with the beginning of social media still being pretty young and we're all on it and people are just like, it just became very clear to me that people were really impatient with each other and just lots of hatred and vitriol and just bashing each other over the head with their opinions and then going ballistic on social media, like character assassinations and all kinds of things. Like people love to call each other Nazis. Like, you're the Nazi of this, the Nazi of that. Like they're just so quick to go there. Like, and for me, like I'm a person that I like everybody. Like I'm not saying that, you know, but like in Native culture, we have a saying, all my relations, we have the flag, it's red, yellow, white, and black. It's like it's supposed to be all the colors of all the different people of the earth. And I really love this saying that Bruce Lee had, which was, he said something like, oh, there's only one race in God's eyes. It's the human race. It just so happens we're all different. And I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I think with the pandemic, I think it's, there's a lot of things they're trying to make about race right now, and I just don't think it fits. I think it's more about state, religious institutions that are very satanic, that claim Christ, but they actually do satanic things. State, the religion, and of course the royalty. You know, like those guys are just, and you know, like these are the entities that are causing problems for everybody.
Yeah. So,
in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think one of the points you made there that really is a crux of so much is how Trump affected people's general thinking. Because when he came into the presidency, it was such a shock, especially to the people that hated anything that he represented, right? That extreme or left version of the Democratic Party in the States. Right. And what happens when people get kind of, I don't know, more, get a feeling more of desperation out of a situation where they think that like the worst possible outcome is manifesting. So they're like, oh my God, we're going to start freaking out more as they grip tighter into their ideologies. And then they become less communicative to people on the other team and everything. And I remember when Trump was in office thinking, holy shit, I've never seen people really this crazy about anything like this. Like, this is weird, but it still was like out there and like in the you know, the media world outside of my life. It was pretty distant. Yes. But the pandemic seems to have been like a vehicle for that split of like divisive teamness and you know, we're going to label this group or that group into an extreme that I didn't even know was really possible necessarily. So no, I mean, I shouldn't say I didn't know it was possible. I just didn't think it was actually going to ever manifest in my life. I thought this was too far away. Yeah. So yeah. So
growing up in the 80s and the 90s, you don't think about stuff like that, right? No. And it's what, 21, and it's just so different.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah. Like, people are like, okay, they're like really out of shape. Yeah. And they're like, you got to be healthy by injecting yourself with, you know, the government's needles. If you do that, you can be healthy like me.
Yeah. Well,
those people aren't even healthy though.
Well, the disconnect too, because like, you know, there was programs where it was like, you know, get a jab and get a free donut. And it's like, do you like, what's the priority here? What are we doing?
Yeah, is it health that they're really interested in? Is it everybody's health? The government care about the old people? Does the government care about the children?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the question.
Yeah.
Does the government care about the old people and the children? Like that's the whole premise of this whole thing, right? So and then I'm sorry, but like the residential school, right? In Kamloops, they found those 215 children and in an unmarked grave, right? And then there's another bunch of residential schools all across the country. I think the number's at like 7,500 and over dead children thrown mass graves. And again, this comes from the royal institution, the Vatican, and the state. And it's not like white people and Indians and stuff like that. It's there's that aspect of Canada, but I think that we're more united now than even before. It's for me, I find it to be more of a question of the state, like I said, and these powerful entities that are big, you know. And we're just, if you're a person that a native fella or a white fella or a black fella or whatever you are, right? Like if you're a working class, we're kind of all down on the same thing here. And it's these huge institutions that are coming down on us all really hard. But then, you know, we get these things that you make it about race, you make it about gender, or you make it about minorities or whatever, when it's, those are issues, they are. But are they like, you know, it seems like we're all bogged down in that kind of stuff, in the semantics of all that, so that we can't really, like, if you think about what with the Epstein guy, Jeffrey Epstein, I think I saw in your email, that dude was under lock and key, suicide watch, and he killed him. Like, it's a total conspiracy, man, and nobody seems to give a shit. Just like those 7,500 children in mass graves, that like people stole them from their families and stuck them in these, what I call satanic institutions, and then they raped them and murdered them. And I'll tell you, man, my dad went to residential school. He's a survivor, and his dad before him, and his uncles and stuff like that. We got some weird stories that come down, like a dude, one of these guys that ran the school was I don't want to say names, but it was a person very close, and he was being raped by this guy and his best friend too. And the guy would do that, and he eventually murdered one of the kids, his best friend, or he killed him. And then so he was doing the autopsy on him, and he had that guy, his best friend, helping him do the autopsy. This guy, like, that he raped both of them, and now they're both in the autopsy, and one kid's dead, and he's like, here, hold his guts or whatever. So he's got to hold his guts in his hand. Like, this is the type of shit you don't really hear about, but it comes. And I wouldn't even have known that, but it was passed down. Like, you just hear about it. Like, people don't talk about this stuff, right? But like, it's pretty evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was aware of that idea for a while. It was interesting that it became public and has been established now. And you know, I'm a firm believer in the idea that whatever the truth is, it needs to come out. It needs to be shown to the world what actually happened, so that, because I don't think you can make sense of things if you don't understand how we got to wherever we happen to be.
Yeah, the truth will set you free for sure.
Yeah, and so
but it's being very clouded.
Mm-hmm.
It's been obfuscated.
Yeah.
When I was doing hypnosis a lot, I was a magician, right? And there's a lot of things you do as a magician to like make the effect happen, or whatever the desired outcome. You think about 10 moves ahead, you know, and plan for all the contingencies and stuff. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on. And when you don't, you know, there's smoke that helps. There's mirrors, lighting, dark. Like, any of these things can help you make it happen. But like also misdirection, Misdirection is the big one, like where it was like, if you're doing something in your left hand, you make them look at the right hand.
Yeah.
And you'll flicker the card or shake it or do something, not to give away any of the secrets, but you you appeal to the animal brain by flickering, and that takes the focus, and there's perception without awareness. They call it perception without awareness.
Yes.
Things are going on. You're perceiving. You're not aware of what's going on.
Yeah. So I think that might be where the key to the whole issue of how you're framing with the institutions, the large scale ones that seem to have lost all connection to humanity or compassion or reasonable behavior even, is where does your attention go? Because if your attention can be directed without your conscious awareness, then you can be led into like participating in all kinds of this.
You could be a victim of it. You could get PTSD from looking at, like Nietzsche said, if you look into the abyss too long, it stares back at you, and you don't want to be that guy.
But that's interesting too, because Nietzsche also said that God is dead because we've killed him, and he's talking about the fact that religion was taken out of the societal sort of framework for thinking, and that has come up with a number of guests I've had on the podcast, and I think it's an accurate thing in that. Where does your attention go? Where does your morality look? Like how do you frame your life? Like what do you see when you look at the world? Do you see an opportunity for profit, or do you see a opportunity to get power and gain over others? Or do you see like this beautiful, harmonious existence that we're just like these little specks that sort of emerged out of that allow us to exist?
Yeah. That's a good question, because it comes down to what you're carrying around in your heart. Like, okay, so the news says it's like this. It's really scary. Somebody ate a bat, and now we're all, you look on the news, they got one level, right? And you could be down on that level. You could be there like, you could be living from there. Or you could, the scared lady down the street, and she's like, oh my God, like you could be living at her level, or your buddy calls you up and he's telling you all his problems, and you're like, oh my smokes, but I think for me, I thought about it, and I'm like, it almost has to be like you have to look out your window and recognize the grace that under which you live. For instance, and this is what I mean, is like if you go to hell, there's no water there, right? There's no water in hell. Okay. And so, but there's water here. You can have a drink of refreshing, awesome water. You're made of water, right? Like you're 60 or whatever the science, follow the science. You're like 60% water or something like that. Sure. So the fact that, water is changed by vibrations. Like I've seen these videos where people are changing the structure of water with sound. And your DNA has like this big code that is written out very intricately. And they say, oh, a bunch of your DNA is junk DNA, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't do anything. But is it? Because like if you are made of water, that DNA is kind of like that. And I think you can unlock certain things in yourself with certain vibrations, not to sound like a hippie or anything, but like I think you like chanting or like native song, like have you ever heard powwow music, makes you feel a certain way when you hear it, right? Like or the drum, the vibration of the drum, or the rattle, or the chant or the hum, like whoa, like that humming makes it can I feel like it can help your DNA express like what you're feeling all the time. The vibrations, you're made of water, you can unlock your DNA and have it express in certain ways, I think. And I think that has to do with prayer and honoring God, the creator, so that when you sing or you drum, you recognize you're praising the creator, so that you're like to live from where, not the news or CNN or Fox or whatever, not to live from fear, but to look out the window and be like, yeah, it's raining, and you can honor God and honor your fellow man, and that you reflect that live from that space, and everything else is going on. You could be way up here on your own little island of that, you know. And yeah, it doesn't mean that shit's not going on out in the world, but it's like I can't remember where I heard this, but it was like mountain climbers, you know. They climb a big mountain and they don't look down. Right?
Yeah,
they focus on their 3-foot world, like what's 3 feet around you.
Yeah,
because that's all goodness. If you focus on your 3-foot world, you're living under the grace of God, because you're living within the touch of water. Water's sacred, and
water.
You are water.
Well,
I mean, yeah. So that's my little personal philosophy of where I've come to try to endeavor to be living from, you know, because if I don't do that, I'll have an anxiety attack listening to the crap that's going on out there, right?
Right. And I think that's super important. I always think about like, what do you see when you look out your window? Like, I see a world that I somehow emerged into, and I don't know how I came here exactly, but I'm here, and I really like being alive. I like doing things with other people. I like other people in general. I like activities. I like every games, whatever. But those are all actions, right? And they're actions that come about because you have a movement, in the sense that you get up and go do something, or your mind moves into some way of thinking, or there's a movement in that sense. So it's interesting that I study Chinese medicine now, something I never had. I've probably been doing since about when you left Vancouver, so it's been about that long. So if somebody has depression, they say that the yang energy is not rising. It's not coming up and trying to reach out into the world to do things, to take on action. And of course, that's a very simplistic generalization in a lot of ways. And I'm not trying to clinically diagnose anything, but just if a person's energy is low and they're not wanting to, and they feel kind of bad about things, they're not reaching out in to do something. They're not willing to take that action. And that's kind of like the basis you need, to have an enjoyable life. You need to sort of set to is, I'm going to get up and take on the challenge. I'm going to do the things. And so that 3-foot world makes perfect sense within that framework. However, to play the devil's advocate a little bit, I think COVID also brought up this problem with, if you're like one of the few people that really want to just sort of live your life, and the rest of the group is like, no, you got to do all these other, that can become a problem too, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, yeah, I mean, there's some scary shit going on. I mean, you look on, I don't know, have you been on TikTok or anything?
I haven't got to TikTok, but I do have a Twitter.
It's pretty wild. Like, don't go on TikTok and start looking at booties and stuff like that, because it'll be a never-ending echo chamber of bullshit like that. But if you start to look at like topics, right, like interest, I'm just wondering, like, if mine's like an echo chamber now, because I just get all these videos that are like the same thing, like conspiracy this, that. Because I look at that stuff, right?
Well,
you see like these videos from people in Australia, and I don't know if it's like what's going on in Australia, but it seems like a lot of crazy shit's going on in Australia.
There certainly is. And see, this is one of the things that's been rattling me a little bit in the last 7 to 8 months, especially, and actually kind of motivated me with the podcast, was the reality of vaccine passports, and the idea that we're going to create a digital ID that meant that you were allowed, based on the government's approval, to go to the restaurant, to go to the pub, to do this kind of thing. I was like, whoa, I don't care what this is about. This is an overreach. You don't get to decide based, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So that shook me up a bit. And now, the most extreme examples in the world, as I understand it right now, are in Australia and Austria for some reason. Where in Austria, they're going to make it legal that you have to get a vaccination, or you'll be fined, heavily fined, or possibly go to jail. If you just as a citizen, just mandatory. And in Australia,
they should put those people in jail that made that up.
You'd think,
I think that, I really do. I think to fuck these fucking assholes and get rid of them. They're idiots.
This is
idiots.
Oh, but this is my issue too with like the institutional evil arc, is that those are still limited groups of people. It's the ability it's the group consensus that allows these things to be managed.
Yeah, I know. It's like You have to. Oh, it's so weird. But have you ever seen that movie Cabin in the Woods? Where it's a bunch of teenage kids and it's like a horror movie and they go to a cabin in the woods.
It has a vague. I
The
can't.
cabin
recall.
has got all these different curses in it, and if you screw around, they wait. It's like the government, and they're like doing an experiment where the kids got to like trigger off one of these curses, and then it comes and kills them, and then the old gods are happy, and they're not going to come and destroy everybody. Blah, blah,
Okay.
Blah, blah. For another year, we're safe or whatever.
Oh, okay.
That's the premise of the movie. And then in the movie, the guys like they go to a gas station, as you do in a horror movie setting. But at the start, they go act up at some gas station, and the guy's like, "Hey, you kids are gonna fucking die down there." You're like, "Don't go down," and they're like, "Screw you, man!" And they go, and they call him the harbinger, because if the ritual is to be complete, there has to be a harbinger, and he has to be ignored. So that otherwise they can't be marked out. They haven't transgressed.
Oh, I get it.
And they can't be marked out for the punishment.
Yeah.
And I thought when I heard that in that movie, I was like, holy shit! Like is that kind of what is going on here? Like there has to be a harbinger, and you have to ignore it.
What would
and then you're the transgressor. You're part of the ritual.
Well, okay, so back when I did a deep dive into the dark occultist stuff to understand it, I came to understand that a big part of the ritual was that the victim had to basically agree to be the victim. Right? Like you couldn't be forced on them. They had to have some kind of consensus to do what they're going to do, even if it was like a really obscure way of getting there and this tricky, bullshitty kind of murky thing. It was still had to be part. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a set of rules.
Yeah, but what I always saw with that stuff was like, yeah, you can like transport that over to like general societal behavior in some way, in a lot of ways. But it's the fact that people are like, they're not really engaging in full, proper, accurate thinking that keeps that process possible, where they will, mindlessly walk to McDonald's and get really, really, really fat and never think, hey, this is not a good idea, right? Like that's not like a complete proper usage of your brain, of your frontal cortex. Like there's some it's not there. So like, is that really consent? Is that really like, or is it like, it gets weird to me there.
Yeah, I don't make the rules, but like if you go by the conspiracies, like you look at like, I don't know, the Denver airport, the mural. Have you seen it? Have you seen the mural?
I've heard. Yes. It's been a while.
Looks like the pandemic. It basically is the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's really weird, man. So, who knows? And then you're just like, la, 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 la. Hey, I'm okay. I like, as long as my 3 foot, maybe it's not so great to take care of your 3 foot world, because we're like, as long as it doesn't affect my little bubble, I'm okay. It's away from me. That's those people over there. It's Australia. It's down under. Like, no, as long as it doesn't come here, and everybody's just like complacent. One of the elders told me something recently. I did a little film last year. It's a short docudrama. Working with this elder. So where I'm from, there is in our heritage, there's shape-shifting, right? So if you were, I'm Dakelh, right? Half breed, but I grew up in the clan system. I'm here on the res, and
okay.
They call that carrier, or the white people would call it carrier Indians, right? But so part of like a carrier man could be in 2 places at once when he's hunting, or he could change into like a bird or a fish, stuff like that. And so there's a bunch of that in our history. So this elder told me the story of this guy Nangwat, who was a chief back in 1806, something like this, and he was the last shapeshifter or whatever, and how they were going to build a house here on the res, the fort, or they didn't want to build a white man house, as they call it. And but so the one big chief though, Ketlo, he said, yeah, okay, you guys can build your house over there. I gave him a bunch of rules. It's got to be like this, stay over there, don't do it. and he let them build. And then his other war chief Nanguat was like off in the world, whatever, and heard about this house, and he's all pissed off. He's like, no way, Ketlo would let him do that, eh? So he went back there and he like shapeshifted into animal. He was going to kill a bunch of people, but at the behest of his own people, he did not. So he was taken prisoner and placed on this island, and he shapeshifted and flew away. And that's the story, right? So I don't even know why I brought that up or where I was going with that, but like, yeah, just like, yeah, there's some weird stuff out there, you know, that's not explained. And this is alternative history, and it's not from that far away, you know, and there's abilities in there that could be construed as, I don't know, like what it is, you know what I mean?
Well, there's always that limit to what you can possibly claim to know. Like I know how my fridge functions well enough that I can rely on it, but I don't really understand how the universe exactly functions. I don't know what the limits are to what possibilities are. It is interesting. I mean, this is one of those big overarching themes that I think helps explain so much of the world, is that whatever for all Western civilization's value, which has definitely got values, it has stripped itself of the connection to spiritual beliefs and spiritual meaning and spiritual potentials, and like what could come about, and if a person really, you know, got more into touch with that, the possibilities, we don't know. We don't have that in contemporary life. And yeah, so I've always loved what I get. Like I get this feeling when I hear stories like that about like possibility. I mean, there's some unfortunate, you know, dark elements to that in that sense too, because people were always rough to each other. But just what is potential? What could be done? Like, why can't we more freely explore that potential without getting silly about it, of course?
Yeah, and like why did the native people get so persecuted or genocided or whatever it was? Was it just for land and resources, or was it something else too? Like, what if they were shape-shifting and doing this stuff where, you know, you had these powerful medicines and like stuff like that that needed to be squashed out, needed to be stamped off the face of the earth? For why? Like so for instance, like, okay, King Arthur, right? King Arthur in Avalon, in England, right? Those guys were clans. They were clansmen. They were tribes. Like they had the Druidic age, and they were doing all that stuff. I don't know if that involves human sacrifice or whatever, but like, so there was dark aspects to it. And then the age of Christ came, and it kind of like the mists of Avalon faded. The clans were no more. You know, it was just there was the Grail and all that stuff, and the New Age. So that all that other stuff went the way of the dodo, and it was gone. And then they came over here later, and there was stuff like that again. And for instance, one of the elders here on the res told me a story. His grandfather took him to this cave a long time ago, and they were in this cave, and there was all these pictographs on the ceiling everywhere. And it told of the news of the goings on of all the nations, people to the north, people to the west, people to the east, south. And like just like lots of different pictographs. That it was like a place of meeting, and you could see all these different things. He said he was a really young boy and he wasn't really paying much attention. He was just like kicking his feet, whatever. But his grandpa told him, and he's like, okay, he's like, you're gonna look for this place when you're older, but you're not gonna be able to find it. You're gonna come and look for this cave, but it won't be here. And he's tried to look for it and he can't find it, and it's like it's local, but like, you know, it's faded, it's gone. Whatever that was ain't coming back. So if you're thinking about, like, for instance, the Sasquatch, right? Sasquatch, like for us we call it Seslo.
Oh.
Yeah. And Seslo. And they were just like people. They had families. They lived up over that way. I think my great grandmother, you know, and this is just passed down by or oration or whatever, like people talk, but like, you know, and I hear this from other elders, right? But I know a lot of elders from around the rest, and they tell me stuff. Oh, your grandmother knew those guys. Like there was a family of them, whatever. And I'm sure, you know, there's a lot to it there.
Huh.
But I think that when the settlers came, those beings, whatever, went into retreat.
Huh.
For whatever reason, I don't know. And just like that cave, you know,
Yeah.
or like the last shapeshifter.
It sounds almost like if you were writing like a, I don't know, like a fantasy novel, you could say that there's like a dimensional portal or something where it's like you're not connecting to this
anymore
that used to manifest it. Like it's all frequency, like it's all dependent on where you're.
And yet there's still echoes of it today.
Yeah. Well, you know,
and I feel like it has something to do with your DNA maybe, and that vibration that we were talking about before.
Yeah. Sorry. Because there is a consistency within this dynamic between the forces of darkness, so to speak, that strip that spiritual potential away from a culture. And then that's, you know, that happened with the European pagans initially. And then it spread itself out through colonialization around the world. Excuse me. And it had that direction, right? Like we're going to ruin the practices of people that have genuine contact with the spirit world to some degree in a way that we can control it for a bit. But what I think about right now, like in terms of context of the modern times, is how if you look psychologically at a person who's gravitates heavily towards authoritarianism, a person that really wants to control every detail of everything all the time, and including other people, in order to sustain that false sense of security that authority they think they have establishes, they dehumanize other people that disagree with them. And so then when that happens, the other person on the other team, on the other side of the aisle, in the other tribe or whatever it is, their value of their life as a human stops having a meaning to the framework of the person and what they're trying to do. And now I think about those two things as almost like layers you can overlay on top of each other, where you have like this mundane psychological behavior that people behave in all the time. But then you have this like spiritual layer that comes in where you can put on much more archetypal mythological meaning to the behavior. And it also explains more of the eventual play out and why you can predict behaviors will go in a certain way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
An elder said something to me. He's like, these aren't legends. This is just our history.
Yeah.
And again, it's alternative history. Yeah. When you grow up in Canada, you learn social studies and you learn about Alexander Mackenzie and all these dudes that they were pioneering in the canoes and scurvy and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Louis Riel. But you never really hear about Nanguat or Keelcho. And these guys they were the big chiefs, man. Like,
yeah,
there's something going on there. There's a lot of history there that ain't in no book. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting. But if most people would be like, this is nonsense when they hear that. When they hear it, they're going to first instinct, this is nonsense. I've heard that before. People say that. But for me, I guess when you grow up that way, like when I was a kid, I grew up on the res, out in the sticks. We had no electricity, no running water, nothing like that. The bush came right up to the front door. And, you know, over years and years of a lifetime, we landscaped and pushed back the brush and built new structures and horse corrals or whatever, and made it more into a homestead or something like this. But back then, you know, it was like, if you want to go to the bathroom, you got to go to the outhouse in the middle of the night, and it's like a little trail through the woods. And you know, that's what it was. And when you grow up, like if I remember when we first got electricity and running water and stuff like that, and it was a big deal. And you know, it was funny because when the power would go out a lot, and it was a cool time because when the power would go out, you know, he was a bush native man or whatever, so he was prepared for all this stuff all the time. He liked it, right? he'd like get out his Coleman burner or whatever, and light it up, and then he'd start telling me like scary ass stories. Sometimes I think about like my upbringing and stuff like, yeah, he didn't hold back on that. Like it was like, all right,
Really?
boys, let's tell the scary stories to the kids and be like, okay, time for bed. Stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Because with native lifestyle, when you grow up in the res, you're privy to a lot of wild stories that you probably never heard of. But we all know them. They're kind of like urban legends and stuff, you know, and they're pretty trippy. Like you can get into some wild topics.
So tell you what, actually, that's an interesting jumping point, because I on a much lighter note, coming from that, how did you find yourself in getting to be a metal band? Because that must have been an interesting process.
I think when I was growing up, I played a lot of hockey, and it was a very competitive attitude. And I first come into the dressing room one day, and they were playing AC/DC. It's not even metal, but like, you know,
yeah,
I just loved that, like the energy of it, like the force of it, like as an outlet for like rage or anger or any one of these things, or just to express yourself musically, but with a lot of energy. I loved Angus Young and like his whole energy. For me, it was music, the love of music, like Ludwig van Beethoven. I really loved like his, again, like going back to like his character or whatever it was, like you felt it in the music. I really liked that, you know. So I guess it was rock and classical, and just like and then later listening to like Pantera, I guess, or Metallica or Megadeth or something like this. So not, you know, still not super hardcore metal, but it was metal enough for me, man. And Sepultura, I like Slayer or stuff like that. And then having been classically trained, wanting to write like cool music and just perform and be in a band. It was really just about that. Really, it wasn't anything like I want to be famous or I want to get the bitches or whatever. It was nothing like that. It was just a need to play rock and roll and to be a bit wild or to like an outlet for the rage, the anger, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, and that's part of what I was sort of thinking about a bit too, because we both can say that story, like my life, that's what it was. It was just, I was drawn to it. I don't know how exactly or why or exactly, but I was drawn to it. And I connected with this desire to express fiery, angry, emotive energy. And, you know, I think that's important though, because like those outlets, which are, you know, being held back right now, they sort of help you sustain your sense of balance, because and then it's, you know, if you want to get into more of the almost the conspiratorial cultural issues of today, there's not a lot of emphasis on masculinity as a positive, and the masculine being something that has a certain sense of empowerment, and that power to me is, you know, largely testosterone. It's largely like I want to, you know, like scream to the invisible orange, right? I want to hold that power in my hands and feel that charge, that fiery charge. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just needs a place to focus itself so it doesn't do anything else.
And really, is that whole holding the fiery orange, is that masculine energy or is that female?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of aspects of metal, like wearing tight pants and stuff, long hair and stuff, that are more feminine than they are masculine. And I always thought that was cool. You know, for me, when I was young, I just didn't like doing what other people were doing. I always wanted to be the guy going, I don't know what the hell was wrong with me, but I just like, you know, like I just did not like.
Well, okay, so here's
I think, what was it in the 90s, Our Lady Peace or whatever, and slowly into this band. And you know what, I listen to it now and I'm like, yeah, that's whatever. Good band. But back then I just despised it. I don't know.
Well, okay, so you know, this is interesting though, because psychological traits, like there according to clinical psychology, there's 5 basic behavioral traits that everybody has some amount of in various degrees. And one of them they call is agreeableness. And so how agreeable are you upon meeting a person or coming into a situation? Do you like seek to agree all the time, or are you willing to say no, basically?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that like metal, and they like it because it kind of gives them a chance to say, no, I'm different. No, I'm not going to be the little in-group thing. I'm going to have this kind of weird, unique flavor to myself. But that's also the people that are first ones to say to the government, hey, you can't overreach your power like this. Because it's like they're like antibodies to corruption, right? They're the ones that people that pop their heads up first and say, no, this is wrong. So it's a very positive thing if it's directed that way.
Yeah, like you listen to Slayer, like Angel of Death, right, or something like this, and like, oh my God, these lyrics are negative, but yeah, but is it any different than Wagner or Mahler to have like the Romantic era was very about death. It wasn't about anything romantic, really. It wasn't about kissing and smooching. It was about dying and shit.
Yeah.
And losing your love and all this crap. Like Romeo and Juliet, they got fucking poisoned. They were fucked, right? Like Shakespeare knew it. It was about despair. And the Romantic era, like Wagner and Mahler, that was the art of it. Like just like Slayer, they're pointing at the not so nice parts to say, yeah, but that's a thing. And like you said, like only a metalhead would point that out, and other people are too uncomfortable for it, right? Or like they don't enjoy that. It's too abrasive, whatever. And like I don't listen to Angel of Death every day, but there are times, there are times. And I listen to less and less metal now. I don't know what's going on, but like, like I like eclectic music. I didn't, I love metal. I express myself as metal in a lot of my writing style. Now I find myself playing a lot more piano and just singing. Voice. It's good enough for me. I do write some metal songs, and then whenever I'm doing producing for the hip hop projects or whatever. Yeah, which is fun too. These days I'm less and less into music and more into like martial arts, actually. I'm really digging, especially since the pandemic and having to work with people all the time, where I didn't before I was an entrepreneur and I was my own boss, but now I have to work with people and I got to be around people all the time, and I got to serve and do these things with an amicable attitude, and I gotta be diplomatic or whatever, and that's really difficult sometimes for me. That's like one of the aspects of my personality that why I probably played metal and why I was an entrepreneur that didn't work with a lot. Like I did shows, but I would be there and then I'd be gone, right? Like, and so I'm losing my train of thought here, but like what was I saying again?
So that we're sort of on that theme of like metal's unique sort of temperament, the signature aspect of it that draws you into being more disagreeable, certainly to a certain degree, or standing alone and that kind of thing. But then that value when you're young is that it kind of gives you an ability to create an identity that is unique. You get to say, I'm not just like everybody else. I get to be more unique. But I think as you get older, it's like what utility do you get out of that? Like, is your ability to engage in the world helping, right?
Yeah, so again, that's what I was saying. Martial arts helps me to calibrate myself so that I'm not giving too much of myself to other people. I guess I have a lot of empathy. I think that's why I did good as a hypnotist, and maybe that's why I was an entertainer in metal and stuff like that too. I don't know, but like the martial arts helps you to safeguard yourself in a way. So when I was growing up, it was like karate, taekwondo, and then it got into the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff, and I toyed with some ninjutsu and stuff like that, boxing, kickboxing, and even like very briefly with you, refreshing me with some of those karate katas, even though that was so distant in my past at that point too, and I hadn't trained much. And now I find myself here in 2021, and I'm doing kung fu now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's a correspondence lessons with a Shaolin monk, and it's really cool because their discipline and their mindset and everything. It's kind of like what you said earlier about you have to get up and you have to do it, even though you don't want to. I can't remember what the meaning of kung fu is, but it's almost like something with acquired skill with effort or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. Like, I love the kung fu because it's opening up. A lot of the warm-ups and a lot of the stances are the same as karate in a way, like the horse stance and the front stance, and they call it mabu and gongbu. And those stances build in a lot of just doing them right with a good form. It's like playing a blues scale, eh? Like if you don't play the blues scale right, like you're gonna have a crappy technique and it's gonna sound like shit.
Yep.
But if you are really careful with your form and your technique at first, you build in the right proper technique, and then later you can improvise, you can solo, you can make songs and riffs or whatever. And I feel like martial arts is kind of like that. I love the forms and how the discipline of putting your body into those positions that aren't comfortable, but they're really cool.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I'm gonna like learn kung fu and be like some fighter or like go kick ass or anything like that. I just love the aspect of the core centering of it. Like the part of it is qigong, power stretching, power training, and of course forms and stuff like that. So yeah, I just love the discipline in it, and I feel like it gives you mental strength that you need to have that every day. And another thing I love about the Shaolin kind of stuff is how they train in the mountains, and it's awesome because like you can go into the forest. I heard this thing the other day. It was like the higher up the higher up water is, the more electric charge there is. Like the higher up you go, like there's an electric charge. So water that comes off the tip of a mountain, it seeks that level of electricity, yada yada voltage. I can't remember. I don't know crap about it, but it sounded really cool. It was like, and then the water comes out, it has the highest electric voltage. It comes down the mountainside, and like, yeah, that's why the monks are so awesome, because they go up on the mountain and train. They're like all filled with electricity, like Goku or something like that. You know, like, but I just, again, going back to like, even though the world seems to be exploding around you and everybody is like, there's all this disarray, it's kind of nice to have a good outlook. You're looking forward to doing a forum in the forest or a mountain or something like this. That's your day. You don't have to like, and yeah, if they come down the road with the concentration camps and start injecting needles with drone hornets or whatever, I don't know, man, but like
drone hornets, yeah,
right. Like,
God damn,
pretty effed at that point, but you know,
yeah. Well, so are you doing animal forms then? Or are you doing like tiger and leopard and that kind of thing? It was the kung fu training?
Yeah, it's just very basic. It's the basic intro to kung fu. So yeah,
okay.
The closest I've got to an animal form so far would be like they call it the bird beak or whatever. Like,
oh yeah, the crane.
I'm gonna grab your eyes out. And yeah, the cool thing about Shaolin monks is they train for the iron hand. So you're beating your hand against a tree, or you're stabbing your fingers into a block of wood or something, trying to rip the bark off with your hand. It's really cool, man. I like it a lot. It makes me happy.
That's right. That's right. I understand, but you know, this kind of comes around towards. I always like to try to touch onto some thinking towards possibly like good solution thinking, something that could, at least theoretically, could help, right? And so, you know, there's a really interesting concept in Chinese medicine that relates to martial arts a lot, but relates to everything. And I think you'll understand why. And what they do is they say that there's this thing called the Shen. And the Shen is a component of your energy that's basically your consciousness. Because there's more than just your consciousness, but that's obviously a focal point of it. So your Shen is said to reside in the heart. And okay, that makes that, you know, people grab that, but it really lives in the blood. And what that means is that the movement of the blood is compared to the movement of the mind. So that when you move yourself around and you do some exercises and forms and all this kind of thing, that's the mind being sort of circulated and pumped and primed and everything. That there's a real profound connection then. And one of the things that I was thinking about, we were talking about this, was like, I've always found, like you were talking about the shapeshifters idea. I've always found that really fascinating, and compared to the idea of animal forms in Kung Fu, right? Like where you're not really becoming a tiger literally in that sense, but like, what are they doing? Are they tapping into like a frequency thing that maybe that is similar to the way a tiger behaves, and you somehow embody that? And it's a fascinating way to think of it, to me, in that sense.
Yeah, one of the things Wei Shifu said was like, he's like, we were doing this one form, and it was like, he's going through. It's like one of the first ones they teach you, right? And like, there's some things in there, like when if you haven't done it or trained in a long time, it's difficult, right? Like you're like struggling through, sweating like a pig or whatever. And he says something like, so when you do these forms, make sure you make the eyes like a tiger coming down the mountain, not a sad alley cat. And it's like, that's true, because like if your eyes are looking like you're looking all jacked up, like, help me, you're not going to be in the right frame unless you're like looking like, whoa, like you're a tiger coming down the mountain in the morning, like the mist. Yeah. Like it just helps. Visualizations, metaphors, not to be all hypnotic, but those speak very directly into your psyche. Metaphors, stories, archetypes, whatever. They go further than logic do, right?
Yeah. And that's part of, I think, what the whole framework of the modern situation is, like this lack of connection to what you could call the spiritual or the deeper meaningful aspect of life. And then the ways to come back to that are behaviors like the ritualized behaviors that engage you in recognizing you're more than just like the programming. You're more than just like what has been set forth to you to do based on consumerism and based on these other things. And I think about the relationship between moving the blood through the body and ritual, which is what a form is, right? And I think how that's really that's got to be somewhere in the keys of keys. Like that's got to be one of the things that can get people to snap out of things is when they engage in a embodied practice in that sense.
Yeah, because like, and this goes to another thing I heard a Shaolin monk say. He was just like, man, you're sitting around and people are out of control of their mind. Like the mind is going, it's over here, it's over there, it's over here, and they don't know. Like they're just like going with it. They have no. He's like, you have to control that. You can't just let it control you. You can't just let it do what it wants to do all the time. You have to. That's why you gotta combine your body and your mind so that they're both in the same place at the same time. And that was the kung fu, right? And I think he's right about that. Like you get into that form and you're in your body. You're thinking about, is my pelvis tilted the right way? Like, you know, you gotta think about, what does this form mean? What are they trying to do with this? Like, well, you're thinking about a bunch of things, so you're combining your body and your mind, and it's in a controlled fashion, and maybe fashion is not even totally comfortable for you, or but you do with effort to acquire the skill or whatever. I'm sure it's funny, like you always see if you go on, I always watch old boxing matches on the internet, or like I love boxing, like Mike Tyson. I just loved it. Growing up, I watched him, and it was I was lucky enough to grow up in that era when he was the king, you know, just smashing out everybody. It was so awesome. And so some of the I like to watch like that kind of stuff on like YouTube. I don't really watch UFC or MMA per se myself. Like I get it, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I did watch the UFC when it first came out and stuff. I thought it was really cool then, like with Chemo and Horace Gracie and all these guys, Howard Payne. And but I liked it more then than I do now, but I still like to watch more obscure fights, like stuff you don't really get to see, like on YouTube you can find some things, and they always have like these. Okay, so like Wing Chun, right? What's the deal with Wing Chun? Like it's awesome, like Ip Man and all this stuff, right? Like, and then you see all these videos where Wing Chun guys are getting like, you know, beat up.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like, they're like, oh, MMA guy will tear you apart, and you want to say like, well, the Wing Chun guy, like, what is the disconnect there? A Wing Chun guy, like, they seem pretty deadly, right? Like, hitting, like it seems like deadly stuff. And like when you get down to the core of it, like they're trying to smack you in the jaw or in the temple or whatever, like it's really deadly shit. And then they get in like a street fight or whatever, and it seems like it's just all when you start fighting in the street, all the rules are out the window.
Yeah.
Right, you're not like cha-cha, like you're like you could be like mad, but who knows what's gonna happen, right? If you're like acting like you're on a Sunday stroll and you're that cool fighter all in control, then yeah, you're probably well trained or whatever, but who knows, right? Like,
well, that same phenomenon happens with Tai Chi people, right? Where they get beat up by usually MMA style fighters.
Right.
Yeah. And so what I see when I see that is I see a person who has never trained properly for that situation. And this is it's delusional to think that you can go up against a really well-trained, aggressive, intense, explosive fighter and not have had experience with that and still do okay. Like you're going to get overwhelmed. I mean, the intensity of a human being coming at you who knows what they're doing, who really is aggressively coming at you, that's not something you can do. You can't learn to deal with that in any other way, but to deal with that, like repeatedly deal with that.
Yeah, you'd have to know Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever.
Well, you have to know principles that will allow you to actually deal with that. Now, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu is based on principles, but these principles exist in other arts. Yeah. But I think, and this is my point, is like, I don't know about Wing Chun so much, because I don't know Wing Chun, but I do know Tai Chi.
Me neither.
And if you train Tai Chi in the context properly, so that you deal with that kind of intensity, you can make that work. But you've got to actually just train that and get used to doing that in those contexts.
Yeah, like I feel like a Wing Chun guy that was amazing and like had a hit with a lot of power, and he was like, he did like I feel like that guy would do well in an average everyday fight against just somebody whatever that was untrained, right? But then, like you said, you get against like the MMA guy who's a young explosive fighter that trained in like mixed styles and all this stuff, like that one style. It's true. Yeah, it's not going to work as well. I don't know. Or do you kick the guy so hard you take his head right off? What is it? I guess that's like the Bruce Lee thing. Like Bruce Lee was like this legend, and they said he could tear a heavy bag in half with his sidekick at will. You know what I mean? Like it seems like some kind of power. Like
I'm sure
kicks you in the guts with that, you're dead, right? Like,
yeah. But Bruce Lee was like, the reality of what a human being can do was really well sort of established through the UFC in that sense, where like if you don't deal with just the gritty reality of another physically well-trained human being, you're just never gonna know. You just can't overcome that, right?
Like would Bruce Lee have come out and just booted this guy over the top of the fence, or what? Like, that's how I want to feel like that. But well, I don't know. He had a 700-pound heavy bag. Did you know that? He had a 700-pound heavy bag that he would deal with on a daily basis.
Huh. Well,
and guys like that trained with him say he would kick it would just freaking go. Like it was scary.
I'm a little skeptical on his legend myself, because I see how well he created his persona, and how that can get drawn into all kinds of assumptions that come up. I find it really strange that he died the way he did. I think that was something kind of strange about that.
Oh no, it's not. Jeffrey Epstein had an island where where they would kidnap people and stick them in underground caves and stick them in drugs and fuck them and kill them and do all this shit. And Bruce Lee made a movie called Enter the Dragon, where a guy had an island and they were kidnapping people and sticking them in underground caves and fucking them and killing them and shit. And then he died during the filming of it, or whatever.
Well, that's a way to look at it.
That's my conspiracy.
Okay.
That's my Bruce Lee. Because think about it, man. He did make a movie about that.
You're right.
Enter the Dragon. That's
You're
what
right.
It's about.
You're right.
And then died during the filming of it. And then it was like, yeah, that sucks.
It sucks, all right.
Yeah.
And it's one hell of a way to get rid of him, because it's like, why did you let him make the movie at all then, if that was the way?
They're like, oh no, he smoked hashish and his brain swelled up because he couldn't hack it because he was so muscly. I don't know, man. Like, yeah, he was so in shape that he was too in shape.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah,
that's what they say.
Yeah, I've never heard of that anywhere else.
He was too in shape.
Yeah,
so totally killed him.
Well,
he should have took a needle from the government. Then he would have been healthy.
I'll tell you a little bit of a tidbit that I don't know if I ever put this publicly, but I'm told by my teacher, whose teacher was a guy named Richard Kim, who knew Bruce Lee quite well. Upon Bruce Lee's death, a person asked Mr. Kim, how did Bruce Lee die? What did he die of? And Mr. Kim said, Bruce Lee died of, Bruce was a bully. He died, his karma killed him. And so I've always wondered what that really meant. Like his karma as a bully? Who's he bullying? Right? It's like,
Well, I guess he grew up in the Chinese street gangs, eh?
Well, he did apparently beat up, especially British guys, when he was living in Hong Kong, apparently. He would go around and sort of bully them, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, just following it a bit, I guess he was. It's a different culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, going back to the Shaolin thing, it's kind of funny when you start looking into it. Like, people go there to learn, and they start studying, and like, they're like, okay, get in middle split, and the person can't do it, and the monks make you do it because they don't care. Because when they were little kids, that's probably when they were there. It's tough training, right? Like, it's a different culture. It's not the same as us. Like, I don't know. If I was going to go train there, I'd make sure I could do the splits first. I wouldn't want somebody stick me in the splits when I still had a ways to go or whatever, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not doing the splits myself these days.
I'm working for middle split now.
Oh, yeah.
Because the reason why is I feel like flexibility gives me more strength than anything does. Like, the more flexible I am, the more strong I am. And it's almost like the fountain of youth. Your tendons and connectivity tissue, your tendons and ligaments need, if they are like, if you can do a split, your life will be a lot easier. And if you have shoulder mobility and stuff, and you're not just like, totally stiff, you're going to be a lot stronger, probably, because you can move your muscles into a different range of motion more easily. Yeah. And you can access different parts. And I'm not saying that it's going to make you stronger, but like, I just feel like, the more flexibility. I've been training that. My brother could always do the splits. He was a hockey goalie and WHL and the ECHL and all this stuff. Yeah. AIHL. And he can do the split still today, and he's really strong, man. Like it gives him like an edge for sure. It's really cool. And
definitely make sure that the blood flow dynamic is maximized, right? So there's no hindrances. It can really flexate. But I find that as I get older now, the flexibility is something I have to stay focused on, because it's one of the ones that gets reduced if I don't immediately. Whereas like muscle tone tends to be, as long as I'm just active, it seems to be okay, more or less. Yeah. But like, I notice with my back, if I don't stretch my back regularly, So
but truly, and because you're actively involved in martial arts constantly, you have to stretch, man. Yeah, like, because you're doing crazy shit all the time, and like, muscles recuperate fast, and connectivity tissue takes like 2/3 as long, or it takes longer. Yeah. So, and you can, like, touching your toes, right? The pike stretch, that one untrains on me quick. Yeah. But if I keep at it every freaking day, it gets better and better and better and better by increments. Yeah. But if you stop for a little while, then you're like, oh my God, you feel like you're a statue again. Holy shit.
Well, you know, that's what it all comes down to, is that consistency, right? That keep everything moving and keep your head up and try not to get caught up in the insanity too much, because boy, is it insane. And yeah.
Yeah. So like with the growing up as I did on the res as a young child, I always had sleep paralysis, and I would have night terrors. So like where you get up and walk around, you don't know where the hell you are, and you're like trying to climb the walls and shit, and just like talking and not making any sense or whatever. But that's not sleep paralysis, that's night terrors. But like sleep paralysis also is like when you can't move, but you're awake, your eyes are closed, you're aware of everything, but you can't move. And it's really freaking scary. So you feel like sheer terror. And so I dealt with that for years and years and years of my life, up into my 20s and stuff, where it was getting really, really bad on me. Spent some time as an atheist, like when I was doing metal early in the metal scene, and it's like I don't believe in God, or I don't give a shit, or whatever, like wearing satanic pentagrams and shit like that. And started to really get bad, more and more sleep paralysis and weirder night terrors, like where I would be like trying to sleeping with my girlfriend at the time, I'd be like trying to snap her fucking neck while I was sleeping, and she'd have to like punch me her hardest, and I'd just roll over, go to sleep and stuff like that. Or I'd wake up and say something brutal and not remember in the morning, right? So the house we were staying in, it was in East Van, and it was like really old building, and I think that had something to do. It was very kind of haunted, in my opinion. And going into the story, like so the sleep paralysis became a real ordeal for me. It was getting worse and worse and worse, and sometimes you could snap yourself out of it by sheer will, force of will, but it was really hard to do, and you just wake up just sweating or whatever. And so I went along. I started researching into it after it started getting really bad like that. I called my dad and I'm like, told him what happened with my girlfriend. He said, son, I know you don't believe it, but you should put your grandmother's rosary above your bed. Yada yada. And I was doing this research. This is back when YouTube was different. Like you could just like look up. It wasn't censored like it is now.
Yeah, I remember.
You could find like crazy stuff. Anyway, and I saw this one thread. It was about something about sleep paralysis in the comments, way down the comments. And some lady said, oh, if you have sleep paralysis, you just say Jesus Christ, and it snaps you right out of it. And I tried it, and yeah, it worked, and it totally works. And I did that. I started doing that, and it always would attack me still more and more, but less and less and less. And I would always say Jesus Christ, and it would instantly wake up and you're fine.
Really?
But you say it in your mind's eye because you're paralyzed. You can't say it with your mouth, right? But so I learned to do that, and I still do that to this day. I don't get any episodes anymore per se, but every once in a while. But I always know what to do, right? And I'll tell you, this sounds really weird, I know, but like I just want to tell you about this because I feel like maybe this will help somebody else one day. So I ended up staying in North Vancouver, and yeah, a lot of people say, oh, it's psychosomatic, it's just a hypnagogic dream or whatever. I don't think so, man. Or you could say the flying spaghetti monster's name and it would snap you out if you believe in that, whatever. I don't think so. I think what works. Anyways, this one time I was going through a really hard time in my life. It was very black, and I couldn't sleep, like couldn't eat, stuff like that, and I was kind of distressed all the time, and I didn't want to like sleep in a room, or like I put my bed like in the doorway. Like it sounds a little crazy, but that's where I put it, like just to deal with whatever PTSD I had from an event that was in my life, right? And I went out and I smoked a joint and I got high, and I came back in and I was like having a bit of anxiety, like, oh, holy shit, I got like anxiety from that. And I laid down on my bed in the doorway, and I was having an anxiety attack. I wasn't asleep. I just closed my eyes. I was on the mattress and I started having a sleep paralysis. And in this one, it was like sometimes it's like a lady and she's very beautiful and you want her to touch you. But when she does, she goes ugly and it's really fucking scary. Or sometimes it's like a shadow man slamming through the door and coming straight at you. Or sometimes it's just nothing. It's like a weight on your chest that you perceive. But this time it was different. It was a squat midget shadow figure. And it came through the door. This is so weird, but like it had a Bruce Lee mask on because Bruce Lee's one of my heroes. And I was just, usually I say Jesus Christ, right, to wake up or whatever. I wasn't asleep, and I didn't say that right away because I was thinking to myself, oh, Bruce Lee, that's pretty clever disguise or whatever. And then I said Jesus Christ really fast. Sometimes you got to say it 3 times, but I said it 3 times in my mind's eye. And yeah, it snapped me out of it. But before it did, that fucking thing grabbed me by the leg, and it grabbed me with a grip that was really strong. Like I'm a big dude, man, 220, 6 foot. Like you get your ankle grabbed by somebody that's big and stronger than you. Like it's a weird feeling. And it scared the shit out of me. And I popped up, boom, and I flicked on all the lights and shit. And yeah, so there's some weird. I wanted to tell that story because I feel like your Dark Path podcast or whatever, and also that might help somebody if you're dealing with demonic energy.
Well, yeah. So I appreciate
you can find a way to deal with it too.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you being willing to share that because I think that a lot more people have stories like this than you assume. Like, I think there's more of this out there than people tend to think. And so often people that have experienced things that can't be explained think they're alone. And it's good that they know that they're not. There's a lot of crazy shit out there. Now, I find it really interesting that for you, the word Jesus Christ became a flip of the switch in a sense, like a way to counteract something. Do you consider yourself to be Christian now because of that, or did that influence you that way?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And the thing is, it not just work for me, but for a lot of other people too.
Yeah.
It's a common thing you will see. If I always thought that everybody had sleep paralysis when I was growing up because it happened to me so much. I thought that's just the way things were, and you just had to deal with it. But I found out later that nobody has. Some people do, but like most people don't. And when you bring up this kind of stuff, they're just like, "You're nuts." Or like, "You're probably a psycho, or you're schizophrenic." But I don't think it's that. I don't think it is, man. Like it was. I was an atheist. I was dabbling with bullshit, and I opened. For me, if you have strong medicine, you shouldn't do that. If you have strong medicine, you should be careful about where you put your attention.
Yeah,
you should be careful about things that are sacred and how you conduct yourself, because I think everybody does have strong medicine, and so it matters it matters what you do and what you say, and what you believe. It matters, like, to an extent. And not to get all Christian, but like, do I consider myself that? I mean, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Lord of life. Yeah. Because of his power to banish those demons or whatever that scary ass shit was. That's the only thing that ever did. Like nothing else worked. And for me, that's really real. So like for me, that made a huge difference in my life. And now my life before, I was like addicted to drugs, really fucking miserable, trying to do all this crazy shit. And now it's totally different. Like I had to switch my life completely around. I had to lose everything and rebuild from nothing, which was good though. And I feel way more contented now. And I feel like I got a family, I got a wife and a baby, and like 41. It's really good. Like I've got so many blessings in my life that I get to be thankful for, and all these good things. So, and I feel like it's partially due to that for sure, because it's a blessing force or a grace upon me for whatever reason. And I'm sure, like, you know, I identify with that. So, and I love when I read like the things that Jesus said, I think are really awesome. And I usually agree with that dude 100%.
Okay, yeah.
I like it. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at now with everything. And having a background in metal, I'm sure a lot of my old buddies would scoff and be like, "Holy shit!" Like, but I don't care, because I'm just living the life of what I'm living, right? Like, I can only be who I am, and be true about it, and be honest, and be proud of it too. And I am. Yeah, and I wanted to share that with you guys, in case anybody's suffering from sleep paralysis, man. it's a dark place to be, and you know, maybe you need to call out, you know.
Well, you know, I've been getting more of an appreciation for the wisdom that Christianity contains, because, of course, coming from a metal background myself, there was that whole anti-Christian vibe to it, or, you know, theme to it. It's definitely part of that. And what I realized was that it's really easy to critique something in like a blanket, like kind of one-dimensional way, and just be like, you know, here's some thing they'll take super literal and just not even consider what it means on more nuanced ways and just denounce it. But thanks to Jordan Peterson, I started to go, oh, wait a minute, that's a really good point. Oh, that's a really good point. And when I watched him do a lecture on the story of Cain and Abel, and he did like an hour and a half, 2 hours on Cain and Abel, and it's like a 4-sentence paragraph, right? And it blew my mind. It was like so insightful, and I was just like, okay, something more to this going on here. But one of the things I think about with that a little bit though is, like, I would imagine that your sense of Christianity, your connection to Christianity, isn't interfering with any of your other spiritual beliefs, maybe some of your traditional beliefs and whatnot, and like how you would balance that kind of thing.
Yeah, because like I'm native and we smudge and stuff. Yeah, so for me, like, yeah, I still smudge my house and stuff, you know, and I do it like in the name of the Creator God, Jesus Christ. So get out my feather, my eagle feather, and I, you know, and I'm not trying to be an idolater, but I'm just like, I feel like, you know, God made this is a sacred smoke or a sage, whatever, right? Like it's an offering, it's a cleansing, it's not supposed to be besmirching anybody, and you're always honoring the Creator with your voice, like when you sing, like in drum, honor God and honor your fellow man. So I think as long as you're in that place, you're pretty good to go. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess being a native, and then with a lot of the stuff that's going on nowadays, that they call it colonization. And so I think there are people that would think that is a colonized way of thinking, maybe. I don't know, but I know a lot of elders, and they all believe in Jesus too, you know. So and I know they went to residential school, but there is, in our reservation, there was a residential school called La Jack. And in La Jack, there was a lady named Rose Prince, and she was a little girl when she went there. She died there, and they buried her, and she didn't decompose. They like dug her up years later. She was like the same as she was. They ordained her a saint. And yeah, that's an interesting story. Like Rose of the Carrier, they call her.
I didn't know that.
A saint. And like,
so that's
some
really...
guy had cancer, and he was on his deathbed, and they got the dirt from her grave and put it on him, and he was fine.
Wow. Yeah, because that's really interesting though, because it shows an understanding that the institutional power that has become corrupt to the point of almost point of no return isn't the same as the teachings. Right?
Yeah, they're incongruent. Like that whole Vatican, like Vatican is really weird sometimes. Like they got a telescope called Lucifer up in the Apache Death Mountains. Did you know that? Like Apache Death Mountains are sacred to the natives there. That's a sacred place.
Yeah.
It's their mountain, man.
Yeah.
And the Vatican's like, no, we're going to set up this this Lucifer telescope of ours.
They called their telescope Lucifer?
Yeah. So, and then they get into this big court case with the Apache people, like, so that they can take and stick this thing in their sacred mountains, and they win. So it's there. And why did they got to stick it there? Because it's a powerful place, probably. It's powerful spiritually, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like mountains. Lots of Native people have a sacred mountain, right?
Yeah.
And we do too. And I couldn't imagine anybody sticking something up there. That would it would be freaking awful if they did that.
Well, that's another thing that has historical sort of context is interesting. Is like even in Europe, some of the oldest Christian churches are built on pagan structures, right? Like they kind of take. But again, the thing that I really find fascinating though is that you're talking about an acknowledgement of the separation of the wisdom and the value versus the corruption and the institutional element. Yeah. And like you mentioned before too, right? There's a lot of extreme tribalistic behaviors in the social media world, right? You know, on this team or that team.
Yeah.
And for you to have that opinion, like that's not part of the templates that you're allowed to have, right? Like you're supposed to have this and this and this as your opinion if you're on this side of the fence. And so it's refreshing to me because that's the kind of thing I want to hear from people. It's like, I understand the difference between the elements that are causing problems and the other elements, and I can suss out, you know, like that's so important, I think. So
yeah, like it seems to me like, okay, so Jesus said, if you mess with children, it's better for you if you had a anchor tied around your neck and chucked into the ocean. That's what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but he didn't say chucked. But, and you know, and he and how you measure it out, it gets measured back to you, he says, right? Which is a scary thought, because like, you measure it out, it gets measured back. Like if you back in the day were a fighter, dude, you go around kicking the shit out of you, you just whatever, like is it gonna come back to you? Or and like what he said about those children, like he said that, and then all these priests that claim to worship him went and abused all these children. And aren't they scared of the wrath that the anchor on the neck getting chucked into the ocean thing? Like, come on, buddy. like that you don't believe in what you're pushing? Or
well, obviously not.
Or they maybe they if they were satanic, like, wouldn't you do that under a Christian church front or a Catholic church front? Like, wouldn't you like, yes, we're the church, and meanwhile you're doing all this diabolical shit in the basement and besmirching the name?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like with the residential school and all that stuff. That's kind of smart. And then back to the human trafficking. That's what it is. That's what that is. It's human trafficking, isn't it? Like, yeah. And they got all these children, and there's like the one. Have you heard the one about the Queen of England visiting Kamloops residential school and then disappearing with like 10 kids? And the guy Willie Combs was from Squamish Nation or whatever, or Seychelles, or I can't remember. But then he was like testifying in the court of law, and he was saying like outlandish things about the Queen of England taking kids, and then he died or went crazy in a mental institute. Yeah, you know, like conveniently for whoever did the crime or whatever. Like,
that's you know, that's one of these ones where it's like because like I have different like sort of, I would say, frameworks that I'll deal with a person who's got a very normal mainstream conceptual understanding of the world, and I know what I can say and what I can't say, or what the range of their expectation is, right, in that sense. And then it gets bigger and smaller with different people. But to anybody that I think will actually listen and think about these things in an honest way, I say, have you ever seen, and I'm sure you have, the footage that Alex Jones got out of the Bohemian Grove situation? And it's like, what the fuck is that? Like, what the fuck am I looking at here? Like, how is this a thing? And, you know, I can't tell you for sure what they're doing behind the scenes because I don't know. I don't know what the real detail is. But like,
do you remember that old movie with Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks called Dragnet?
Oh, yeah. It's in my mind.
Movie Dragnet.
Yeah.
With Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd, and they're like two cops that bust up a cult.
Yeah.
Doing like satanic rituals. It's a drug ring and stuff. And kind of reminds me of that Bohemian stuff.
Well, but like,
really gives you the heebie-jeebies.
Oh yeah, like they built an effigy an owl god from the Phoenician Canaanite times. Like they built it. Like it's not like, that's not the kind of thing you do. Like I might throw up a tent for the weekend, right? Like that's a serious endeavor, right? Like what the hell are you doing? And then I just recently watched a documentary on Netflix on Jeffrey Epstein and that whole thing. And I'm basically aware of most of it. But one of the things that really strikes me is the place on his island that he has set up that looks like a Turkish bathhouse that has these very distinct colors and stripes, and there's a pattern in the front, and it's like, what are you doing in there? Like what is this? So yeah, I don't like going in to say I know what's going on, because I don't know, but I know that the signs are there, that things are going on that are like way beyond what people think is normally possible in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole of like conspiracies, like it's like cloning and fucking reptilians and cannibals and underground bases with torture tables and gray aliens, and they're not aliens, they're actually demons behind the sun, and fucking Earth is flat and there's no space, it's just a bunch of water up in the sky and water below, and if you want to get to space, you got to go down through the ocean, and then so there's a lot that like conspiracy theories, right?
Well, yeah, but see, the thing is though, is like I like to try to figure out where you can sort of get to the edge of the known, where you can get to that edge and say, okay, I know that this is happening, but I don't know much beyond that, right? Yeah. And so like so like the UFO thing, I think that's a really interesting one for this, because there's a lot more information coming out to confirm that they exist to some degree in some way. These things, especially in the ocean, the Navy is, very open now saying that they exist. Well, what are they? Well, you get into this conspiracy, like what, the theories, but there's something there. There's something at the edge of the known that's flickering and saying, hey, you don't understand what's really going on in your own reality completely. There's more than you think here.
Yeah. No. And if I think if a person ever has a problem in that area, again, going back to the name Jesus Christ to save you from it is a good idea. And a good approach, because those things, I don't think they're from outer space. I think they come from under the water. I think they come from under the ground, and I don't think they're alien in nature. I think they're more demonic in nature, and that's just a personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am.
And that's not, I don't know, that's the way I feel about it. Yeah. And it's weird because I never thought that way before, but just like that's kind of where I arrived at. Yeah. So like I've seen some weird stuff in the skies, and
well, isn't there also though the idea that the aliens are there's at least contingents, and there's some are beneficial and some are not.
There's these guys that are big, blonde, human-looking, beautiful people, and there's the gray ones that are scary as shit, and the reptiles, and I've heard all that too. It's pretty wild stuff. Like conspiracy theory world is, it just doesn't end, man. And I bet you truth is stranger than reality. Like, okay, so let's pose this question. We don't know crap, but like, we know, what do we know? We know that the government lies about stuff. Now, like say for instance, Sasquatch. So many people have seen this, right? Like, and the government's like, no. And they make it, Bigfoot, it's like a monkey in the woods, but the thing can teleport and like mind speak and do all these things. And there's been so many people in the world that have had these experiences, but it's a big laughable joke. And if you're a scientist, you better not go there, or else you'll lose your then you're done, right? So, but like, why not? Like, why would you not, as a scientist, go there? Like, and not the laughable shit, like a bunch of guys running around the woods, knocking on trees and whooping around in the night, but like the science of it, like the DNA or whatever. And they lie about that. So why do they lie about it? Why? Like, okay, I'll tell you a little story. A couple of years back, 2018, there was a bunch of wildfires up in BC. I was on a fire crew. I was the boss of a native fire crew. We were out on the Cluskers. I had my buddy with me. He was my right-hand man, and he's gone now. He disappeared in Great Slave Lake. Sad to say. But back then we were firefighting, and he told me, like, okay, so I heard this from one or two people, but the train went by close to here where it goes all the time. It's part of our res. And I guess he hit a baby Sasquatch. And so the train, he thought he hit a person. The army came in and took the body. They stopped everything. And my friend is the one that drove the conductor away from the site. And he was like, oh my God. He was like freaking out of his mind. And my other friend that was out firefighting with me told me that he saw the army there coming in to, you know, get the body or whatever they do. Cover it up. Is why. Fuck knows why. And you know, it's we as the native people, like if you see what's going on with Wet'suwet'en natives, and I guess the Mohawks, before the pandemic, the Mohawks covered, they blocked the train tracks. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And everybody was freaking out and getting mad at natives and stuff. And then the pandemic happened. You didn't really hear about it again. And
yeah.
So like, and when they have a Sasquatch incident or something like this, the army comes in and does what? With, like, did they hunt them down? And why? And are they connected to native people? And why? Because they seem to be part of us. Like, they seem to be with us in our places. You know what I mean? Like, but is it like that, or are they part of like the mists of Avalon? Faded back. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big mystery, and the government lies about it. And I'm only saying that because they bring the army in to grab the body or whatever, or do what they do. And maybe they do that for our own good. I don't know. Maybe if you knew the truth, it would scare the shit out of you so bad you wouldn't be able to sleep at night, right? Like, who knows? You see how many people rush around the store buying toilet paper all the time. Something goes henny penny, the sky is falling, and everybody's at the store buying up all the toilet paper.
Yeah, I know.
Instead of getting a bidet or something.
See, I think that one of the ways to explain the human race in a general sense is that we have a history where Graham Hancock would say we're a species with amnesia. So we've forgotten so much about the bigger story of our history. And of course, and then what happened in that history? Well, something must have happened that really screwed up our psyche in some way. That's a way to put it. So Graham Hancock, this alternative historian, always points to major cataclysms. So like great upheavals and asteroids and all this kind of like, you know, like impossibility to live through situations. And so my thought is, okay, well, if you were a human being and you had evolved a very sort of harmonious relationship to the natural world, but then there was all these cataclysms, it could create like a trauma-based experience where you disconnect a part of yourself, and then you create a thing we call an ego that thinks of itself in isolation, it's distinctly not a part of that world that you can't trust anymore, because that natural world has been so disrupted by all these other things. And then you get a population of people like this, and the greedy and most narcissistic ones are going to find themselves able to control the rest, because they're all going to be like, you know, like neurotically looking for some way to not feel anxiety. There's always going to be that thing. And that seems to be like what the last 6,000 years is largely. And then, like, you know, there's the stories like the Jesus, you know, he shows up and he says a bunch of really profound, brilliant things, but then he gets killed because, you know, you can't
get him.
Yeah.
He raised he was healing the sick. Get him.
Yeah. Yeah, because it upsets
like, he's like Jackie Chan. He can't go anywhere without people lynching him. Right on. He's the nicest guy ever, and everybody's kicking his butt.
Yeah. So yeah, it's
have you read Wilhelm Reich, or is it Wilhelm Reich?
I know who Wilhelm Reich
is. Not Carl Jung. I noticed you quoted Carl Jung, but the other guy. There was Freud, there was Carl Jung, and then there was
Reich was it
Reich?
Wilhelm Reich was a student of Jung, I believe, because he was an archetypal psychologist,
and he wrote this book called "Why They Murdered Jesus" or something like this. Have you read that?
I've never read his book.
Why They Killed Christ, and it's really interesting, man.
Okay.
You start reading this book, and it's like it talks about like if somebody's really good, the human race is gonna kill them.
Well, yeah, but see, this is another thing that I think that and I only just recently, in the last few years, really came to really appreciate was, and it isn't just Christ, but any figure that represents a perfection is a judge, because you look at it and you're judged by it because you're not perfect. So you look at this being that's so profoundly perfect and you know you're not that, it makes you either run away in terror because you're neurotic and you can't handle it, or become humble and actually say, okay, I'm going to work towards this end that I know I can't achieve, because that's the humble approach in that sense. So when people, so you can imagine, and it makes sense to me, that if some person suddenly became so perfected as a person that they went out into society and started talking, the rest of society, who's all fucked up and doesn't have that ability to look at themselves in that mirror, would look at that person and just start labeling and projecting on them, because they're making them feel their own lack of self-confidence, their own lack of selfhood.
Yeah. Or maybe they know exactly what they're doing and they like it and they like to hurt other people. And so they gravitate to, if they're smart, there's a lot of people like that. And a lot of them are dumb. And those are the guys that get caught for like doing stupid ass murders and stuff. But then there's like probably really smart ones that become judges, politicians, and like wouldn't you, if that was what you wanted to do, was be a psycho controller or like killer guy? Like wouldn't you just go like for something that would allow you to do that, like being a judge, for one thing? Look at that court case that's going on right now, Ghislaine Maxwell. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And have you seen the judge on that one?
No.
And right away the judge is looks sketchy to just looking at this person. I'm a hypnotist, I read body language and shit, and I'm just like, like demeanors, right? Like, anyway, the judge right away was like, the public should not know about any of the details of this.
Oh, that was the judge you said? I heard that quote in a story. That was the judge?
Yeah, so the judge, because of course they want to keep it all, but who knows, maybe they do have legit altruistic legal reasons for doing that, but I doubt it.
Yeah, theoretically.
You know what I'm saying? It's always under the veil of altruism.
And
then going back to what you were saying about like, it's almost like there was an event that happened that PTSD'd everybody into an ego trip where you collapsed your world. I remember Michael Sarian back in the day. That guy he had the cosmic abandonment theory.
Yeah,
like it was like something about like the human race getting abandoned here and left. I don't know, that's way on. I used to listen to that guy a lot. He had like this 10-hour video on YouTube. It was Ancient Aliens, Origins in Atlantis.
That's it. Yeah.
Holy smokes. Talk about going down a rabbit. I watched it and
he was a very smart man.
Stuff. Yeah, like I like history, right? And that guy's a historian and he knows. And he puts it forth pretty dryly. But it's also very interesting.
Oh yeah. Well, there's something else that we don't know for sure in terms of our history. There has to be more going on there. I just can't see it being out of the way. And then like what the ramifications of that are and all this stuff, we don't really know. But we also everything we've talked about has all been part of not only like this bigger story that humanity is telling itself and experiencing, but also like the day-to-day minutia of our lives to the political current. Like it's all similar, where the human being is not at peace within the framework of the universe, and there's this disconnect and this tension that comes up from it, and then all these behaviors spew out that are often terrible behaviors because of that. Like it's all revolving around that sort of thing. Yeah. So there you are.
Pretty profound. Yeah. I remember I used to work on motorcycles and my mentor that was teaching me about Harley Davidsons and stuff, he was like, what did he say? It's real fucking fun to have your head up in the clouds all the time, but make sure your feet stay on the fucking ground.
Yeah, well, there it is, right? The day-to-day wisdom, right?
Yeah. And that's the kind of practical wisdom I live my life by.
Well, man. Yeah.
But there is like, I do enjoy the wild topics that are out on a limb. And indeed, my life hasn't been status quo, has it? Like, I doubt yours has either. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you've experienced that you can't explain. Yeah. And that like make you wonder too. And just the nature of reality, human beings such as we are, people, like, what's our purpose? Who put us here?
Yeah.
Like, did they engineer us? Like, are we supposed to be worker, slave, warrior people? Like, who knows? You know, like, there's just a lot.
So I think we're probably gonna try to look at wrapping it up here a little bit, but I wanted to just make sure I shared this with you because I haven't seen you for a long time, and this is tying into that. Is if we're here to do anything, I can't imagine that we're here to do deviant and terrible things to each other. I just don't see the idea. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like the universe didn't create itself to torture conscious life. That doesn't make sense. But I think that expression and passion and enjoyment and camaraderie and connection and all these things are the things that I gravitate towards as what makes my life valuable and worth it, and why I want to get up in the morning and why I want to take on new challenges. And so anyways, there's been lots of experience, good and bad, in my life, but one experience that I really value, that I really liked, was years ago when you were living in Surrey, I think, or yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I came down and we recorded some guitar solos for the album I put out with Chromatica.
Right.
And I think you did 2 solos, I'm pretty sure.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so the first one was more straightforward. It felt like more like, you know, it was understandable what to do. It just sort of, and you did, it was great. But the second one, I was looking for this like wild, dime baggy, squealy craziness thing. And we tried a bunch of recording of it. It didn't work, and it did work. And, yeah, you know, I was okay. But then at like 1 a.m, we've been drinking and smoking and everything. Right? And then you just did this crazy solo. It was perfect. It was just perfect. It was the perfect solo. And so it's still actually one of my favorite points on that whole album is that one solo at the end of a song called Finger Carrion. And that's life, right? That's life. That's the value of it. So
yeah, it's true. Yeah. It could really come together like that, where you just hit that solo and you're just like, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love those moments in the studio where you're just like so sure about it. What just happened, and you just love it, and it clicks.
Oh yeah,
it was what you were looking for, and maybe you couldn't get it. Yeah, that's really cool.
And you feel like there's something bigger going on than just your little, you know, thing. Like there's something there that like came through at that moment that just brought everything together.
Yeah, it's like, what do you think the meaning of life is? Like, when before you were here, who were you? Where did you fucking come from, man? Because it seems like you just pop on the earth and like you don't remember anything before that, right? And then you have like deja vu or whatever, and it seems like you've been there before, or you know, like, and some people, like, it's almost like you made a promise to the creator before you came here. And there's something you're supposed to do that only you can do it, and that there's a mark you have to hit. And when you sinning means to miss the mark. That's all it means, to miss the mark. So when you're off, like Samson, for instance, like he put him on the earth to be an ultimate warrior, kill the Philistines or whoever it was. I can't remember how that story goes, but he was more interested in chasing skirts, you know, and living his own life, not the path that was set before him, whatever the promise of who he was that was supposed to be fulfilled. And so he went about chasing Delilah until he gave her his ultimate secret of his strength, and then she betrayed him,
right,
and cut it because he was living for the love of whatever. And she betrayed him. They burned his eyes out and stuck him in a dungeon, and that is when he started to hear and see clearly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's when his feet got placed back on the path towards the mark. And I think that the whole Jesus Christ thing pulls you around to the mark. from the sins or whatever. Like if you're off sinning over here, you're sinning over there, you're not anywhere near the mark of the promise you made to the creator, whatever. The thing you have to do that you don't know what it is. Right. But there's clues. So I don't know, it sounds really weird, but that's kind of the way I think about it. So when I like pray, I'm like, I want to be on the mark. Like I want to be, if you get off the mark, you're off on your own things, but coming around to like the Christ, you know, that brings you back to the mark. So like right back on there. And it's the other thing. And it's not that you shouldn't sin. Like you can sin all you want, man. See what it does for you. See where you end up when you're doing that. If you're out, like, you know, doing that kind of stuff all the time. See how healthy and happy and well adjusted you are after a bunch of that. And I guarantee it probably won't be very much. But when you get on the path, the right path to the mark, whatever that is, I don't know. I'm not saying, this is just a hypothesis of mine. And I'm not saying I know everything. This is just where I'm at. And I'm just, I'm sharing it for the sake of, like you said, we haven't seen each other for 10 years. So yeah, man, that's kind of the way I think about it. I like to try to be on the mark. Doesn't mean I'm a perfect person either, man, because I'm not. But just you do your best, right? And hopefully when you leave them better than you found them.
Well, and as you're saying there too, is like your aim is high. Your aim is towards the good. You're willing to stand up for that to some degree in the ways you can, and that's to me the only way we're going to get out of the mess that we're in, right? Is to keep aiming like that and keep having good conversations too, where people can really just openly talk.
The truth, like you said, the truth will set you free.
I didn't say that.
If we knew that, no, you didn't. Jesus said that, but like it was like, you know, it's just another smart thing that guy said. Like, I could totally agree. Like if you're getting lied to all the time, you can't make a proper decision, right? Can you? But once you know the truth, maybe it hurts, but then you can peel off the Band-Aid and move on with your life and rebuild, right? Like it will set you free. It sucks to face the truth. It sucks.
It does, but you know that's part of what keeps me going is I have this incessant sort of optimistic push that there's a good world ahead if the direction goes well and people keep that because if I ever woke up in the morning was like, no, there's no hope, then I don't know how I'd get through my day, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's like not to focus on your 3-foot world, but live from a place of there is hope, and this is awesome. We are in the grace of God. This is great. I got water. Like I can go have a nice thirsty drink of some lemon ginger. It's cold, it's refreshing, and then I can lay on my couch and I'm feeling good. I got my little baby. I got my wife. Like I feel awesome, man. Man, my world is great. And no, I don't want the goddamn government coming on me. Like, stay the hell away from me, man. Like, let me fish and hunt and be in the woods. That's how I want to live. I want to build a house. And live off the land and be a simple man. That's all I need. I'll play my guitar, do some music, like that. The simple things in life. It's all I want, all I need. You know, I don't need to be a rich Kanye West mogul. I don't need none of that stuff, man. Never did.
You know? Well, that should be the path that we all kind of aim at, I would hope, and hopefully we can get to a point too where the neurotic people stop pushing everybody to behave the way they want them to behave and let people just sort of live their lives. And then maybe we can go see a show together or something again.
And I think the key, what's needed for the world in a word is compassion. Compassion. Have compassion. Oh my God, this guy's not vaccinated. He shouldn't be he shouldn't be allowed in the hospital to get care. Just have some compassion. Just have some compassion. Like that's all that's needed here. We don't need to throw each other under the bus. We just need to have compassion for each other, and that's it, really. Like, I'm sure that could solve the whole deal. But people have to stop lying and hurting the children. Have you ever heard that Pink Floyd song, "The Gunner's Dream"?
Sorry,
no one kills the children anymore. That's what he said. It's Pink Floyd.
That's
like the album After the Wall. I think it was the album After the Wall.
Okay, maybe, but it's vague.
It's vague, but the lyrics are powerful. Holy smokes. The Gunner's Dream.
Well, I like what you said, that I guess Jesus said was like, throw a chain around their necks if they hurt children, right? Throw them in the ocean.
Yeah, that's what he said.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
But
he wasn't about hurting children.
oh God, I can't even fathom that sometimes.
Yeah, it's scary, eh? Like to think about, like, oh man, like that whole residential school, it sucks, dude.
Oh.
There's one more thing. The Jack residential school, the one that's over here, or was over here, the one that I guess we could lay claim to in a way, in a scary, dubious way. There was 4 little boys that tried to run away from there in the winter, and they froze on the lake over here and died. One of them went back, but they tried to escape and froze. Yeah. And so they want to tell that story the world needs to know these stories.
Yeah.
So we're working on that. We're working on a script for it, and we're going to try to make a little production. And this is just, internal stuff. This isn't Hollywood or nothing. This is just us. The Dakelh people working on our alternative historical account, working on our self-governance and all these things that we're starting to do. And I would really, I was very hopeful for people to come together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's also what needed, like, is that compassion for your fellow man to come together, no matter what race you are or gender or whatever. Let's not spit on each other or condemn each other, and let's come together and for the good of all. It sounds so silly to say that, but like that is, that's isn't that what's needed here? Seems like so simple, man. Just no, but it's everything's complex, so we could talk about it forever.
We can, but
it's been a good talk.
It really has, and that's a good note to leave it on, though, because is as much as it's simple, it may not be easy, but it is the aim, and it is the goal, and it is what we both can agree on completely. And
yes, exactly.
The other thing I was going to say, though, is you did mention that you're working on some really interesting historical sort of productions, it sounds like, in that sense.
Yeah, film. Yeah.
But is there any websites, or even with your band or anything you want to plug?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody would be interested in the hip hop project that I've been doing, but it's called Kedah Clan. Kedah Clan. And we have a big hit called Good Time Chi. And then the metal band that I was in was called Omega Crom. And for me, I feel like our best work was this album Beyond Control from
I remember.
It was pretty fun and cool.
Yeah.
And I got some new songs of metal that I want to put out, but I don't know if I'll put it under that old banner or some new thing. I think. And the film stuff I've been working on is all for my job right now, so I don't really do any of my own. Like I did the Nangwat Shapeshifter. So you can look on YouTube under a channel called Memory Keepers and Storytellers. And that's the channel, Memory Keepers and Storytellers. And a lot of it's just elder interviews or like res business going on. But some of it's like those stories, like The Cave or The Shapeshifter.
Okay, that's great.
I haven't done a lot of those ones, but the more, as they would call it, mythological or legendary. But and again, as the elder said, that's not a legend. That's just our history. Nice. So it's for me, I think if I ever made a movie of my own, I don't know what category it would fall like of my own projects and my own volition. But right now I'm working for the people, trying to get their stories told and get
that's really cool,
recorded. Man. Yeah, because the elders aren't going to be here forever, man.
Yeah.
And so I want them recorded in 4K with hi-fi audio and stuff like that. And that's what I've been working on. And then that, like the story about those children that froze and stuff like that too. Yeah, it's got to be told. And it's not going to be a big budget anything, but it will tell the story. And
that's amazing. That's amazing. I'll make sure that when I post this, there'll be a link to that if you want there.
Cool. Yeah. Link away. Yeah. That's about it.
Okay. Yeah, no, man. Thank you. Thank you for spending some time and chatting, and thank you for being honest about some of this stuff, because it's not stuff people hear talked about every day, and that's great. And so hopefully in the future, we'll get you back on the podcast.
Yeah. We say in Dakelh, we say thank you. Snitchalia, like that. Snitchalia for listening.
Snitchalia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Snitch,
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then,
Snitch, yeah.